to Bitcoin Season 2. Today we're talking about what you missed on the Operation Chokepoint 2.0 hearings last week. This is going to be a spicy one, but I guess we should introduce ourselves first to the new CoinDesk audience. I'm Charlie.
Colin.
And we are Bitcoin Season 2. It's about the new stuff happening on Bitcoin ordinals, Layer 2, some technical discussion, the cultural evolution. Sometimes this podcast will get technical. Sometimes it's just going to be cultural, and we'll keep it surface level sometimes.
So usually this show for today would be an interview with Charlie, with one of the shakers and movers in what we call the Bitcoin Season 2 ecosystem, all of the new things happening on Bitcoin. But for the first show on the CoinDesk feed, we are doing Writer's Room, which is a special edition of Bitcoin Season 2, where Charlie and I cover the latest and hottest, spiciest news and topics that are trending within the Bitcoin ecosystem. Charlie and I cover news from technical stuff to mining at block space. So we're always keeping our finger on the pulse of what's happening. And we like to imagine Writer's Room as a space where we are inviting you into the pitch room for Bitcoin Season 2, as we are the screenwriters of Bitcoin Season 2.
Yeah, so before we get started, I want to shout out that Bitcoin Season 2 is brought to you by Arch.network. It's bringing the speed of Solana with the best of crypto UX to Bitcoin. I've known the team for over a year, and I'm a huge fan. I would say that I like the tech. More on Arch later on the show, but let's get started.
Hey, this is Will with Blockspace Media, and I don't know if you heard, but we just announced the second edition of our conference series, OpNext, now to be held at the MicroStrategy HQ in Tysons, Virginia.
That's right. After the success of our first scaling conference at Fidelity last fall, we're doing it again this spring, April 11th and 12th at the MicroStrategy HQ. I'm really excited for the programming. We have various stakeholders, industry, developers, and Bitcoin miners present.
So join us in April for open, neutral, and honest conversation about the leading proposals and technical solutions that will scale Bitcoin to the next billion users. No booths, no tokens, no shills, just Bitcoin and honest conversation.
You can find tickets and more information at opnext.dev or click below in the show notes.
You know what's hilarious, Colin? We shot that ad reel for our conference like a week ago, and you and I are wearing the exact same shirt.
We actually don't change. This is Writer's Room. We are always locked in the pitch room. Sometimes we're in the green room before shows. We never leave. It's kind of like no exit, except there's only two people, and it's Charlie and I.
We're locked in. You're not locked in here with me. We're locked in here with you. But it also, like, classic MicroStrategy, or shall I say strategy, changed their name since we recorded that. It's only like 4 or 5 days old. So we are now having it at the Strategy HQ in Tysons, Virginia.
Yeah, please check out opnext.dev to learn more. We're really excited about this second edition of OpNext. Last year's in November in the Fidelity Center in Boston was a big hit. It's going to be a highly technical Bitcoin conference, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check it out. Tickets are going fast, so please get them. Charlie, speaking of... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's the hook? I was
going to say, speaking of no exit, we actually have the opposite of this. It's no entrance with Operation Chokepoint 2.0. And that's going to be the focus of today's show. There was a hearing last week on Capitol Hill about this covert initiative by the Biden administration to essentially debank and dismantle key financial pillars of the crypto ecosystem. There's a lot to unpack here. This has been a conversation or a topic that has been passed around the crypto ecosystem for years. It's one of those things where, depending on who you ask, it was either a nonsense kind of far-reaching conspiracy theory, or it was something that was just not a big deal because these are just crypto bros and finance people who can make their bag doing something else anyway. Or if you're talking to people within the industry, this was a huge deal that really hampered a lot of innovation and cost a lot of people their livelihoods. And so for today's show, we're going to do some quick background on exactly what Chokepoint 2.0 was, who and which financial institutions were most hampered by it, and then do a quick recap of the hearing last week, which kind of blew this into the open for a lot of people that weren't paying attention beforehand.
Yeah, so basically, Bitcoin's been getting punched in the face for years, even more so than normal under the previous administration. But if you want like a human face to something kind of ambiguous and spooky sounding like Operation Chokepoint 2.0, I myself have been debanked multiple times through both corporately and personally. So like, this is visceral. I think a lot of us, roll the clock back to like 2022 post FTX. We're like wondering, like, we've always been used to like pretty harsh and dismissive treatment from the conventional rails that businesses operate on, at least in the US. But it got like really weird because like people are just getting debanked inexplicably out of nowhere, especially towards the last couple years of the Biden administration. And then we had the Silicon Valley banking crisis. And it was like early 2023 I think some of this started coming out, and a lot of us, myself included, were like, oh yeah, that's totally what was happening. We just didn't like actually know to identify it as a specific initiative. So like, look at me, this is the face of those who have been choke pointed. So yeah, Colin, let's drop in. Where do we give the context here? What was happening?
So I think you gave some good context at the beginning there, because I think you do need to root this in the fact that the crypto industry has always had banking issues, like since the inception. Some of this makes sense if you really want to steelman the position as to why that has existed. One of Bitcoin's first touch points for the majority of people is the Silk Road, which is something that we covered on prior shows. Go check out blockspace.media or our YouTube channel to find those writers' rooms. So crypto and Bitcoin has always been mired in this perception of it being basically existing only for shady activity or being congenital with illicit activity and things like that, right? And then fast forward to the last bull market, and it was finally starting to get legitimized. And then FTX happens, which, by the way, FTX US was a fully regulated exchange under US regulators. And, it still went belly up. And then that served as the pretext for the Biden administration and Congress to say, okay, we're going to crack down on this stuff. So where do we start? We start in December 2022, and we were referencing an article that Nick Carter, a founding partner at Castle Island Ventures, wrote for Pirate Wires back in February 2023, entitled Operation Chokepoint 2.0 is underway and crypto's in its crosshairs. If you are not on video, recommend you hopping over to YouTube if you want to see these visuals.
Oh yeah,
on the CoinDesk website for the video, because
the header image is the thumbnail is class.
The thumbnail is the best. It's President Obama awarding President Biden the Presidential Medal of Freedom, I believe is what it's called. Anyway, this is going to be a highly visual episode. We are going to tell you what we were sharing if you're listening on audio, but this starts in December of 2022. After the fallout of FTX. Now, for our listeners who weren't around then, FTX was one of the largest exchanges in the world at the time. And in late November 2022, it became very clear that they were insolvent, and Bitcoin gets absolutely crushed. It was already in the throes of a bear market. It peaked in 2021 at like 70,000 and then was trending downward for all of 2022. The FTX stuff happened, and then the bottom just drops out. FTX had about, I think, like $8 billion worth of obligations. What they were basically doing is they were taking customer deposits at FTX and using them for Alameda Research, which was a trading firm that was run by the FTX team. Anyway, this happens, and the goons on Capitol Hill wasted no time using this as a pretext for a general crackdown on cryptocurrency. So on December 6th, this is what kicked off the whole thing. Senators Elizabeth Warren, John Kennedy, and Roger Marshall sent a letter to crypto-friendly bank Silvergate, scolding them for providing services to XTX and Alameda Research, and lambasting them for failing to report suspicious activities associated with those clients. Notwithstanding the fact that they were servicing FTX, and I believe it was FTX US, which was a regulated exchange that only served U.S. customers. U.S. customers were barred from accessing FTX's global counterpart, the actual FTX exchange. And there were just a series of letters and memos sent out to these banks over the course of December and January. There's a lot to unpack here. I recommend that you go read the article, but without belaboring it too much, this saga went on for a few months, and there were a few key things that really went on that basically tanked these banks for good. And that's what I want to focus on now. There's a follow-up to this reporting from Nick Carter 2 years later, more than a year later, in September 2024, when we got a hold of Silvergate's bankruptcy documents. And the basic idea of why Silvergate failed, or at least the, I would say the regime narrative of why Silvergate failed, is they had overexposure to FTX in the crypto industry. The crypto industry tanked, and there was a bank run. Now, as Nick Carter argues in this article, and it's largely, I think, accurate, Silvergate actually survived the bank run that the FTX fallout sparked. Other banks did not, like Silicon Valley Bank, which was cut up and sold, and Signature Bank also did not survive. But Silvergate largely did. And what ended up happening was they didn't end up going bankrupt because of a bank run, but because of something that Nick points out here, which is critical to this story, which I'm going to just lay out here. Silvergate could have survived, Nick Carter writes, if not from pressure from regulators, which allegedly included an informal mandate to cap its crypto deposits at 15%. Now, Silvergate was a bank before all the crypto stuff, but they basically made their name in the crypto industry. Like the majority of their clients were cryptocurrency clients, exchanges, startups, other companies. And so the FDIC, or not the FDIC, the San Francisco Federal Reserve actually, via an informal mandate from the federal government, basically told them in conversations, you have to cap all of your deposits from crypto companies at 15% of your entire book value, which is basically a death knell for the business, right? Like all of their clients are cryptocurrency clients. They're like, or most of them, the majority of their business comes from the cryptocurrency industry. And now they're being told that they can only have their deposits be 15% of their overall book value for those clients. So they eventually just like couldn't meet the demands of their customers. They didn't have enough liquidity to service exchanges and other companies. This also ended up hampering a 24/7 trading line that they had. I think it was called, let me see, I have it in my notes here. They had this 24/7 trading line that they opened up with the cryptocurrency companies since, crypto trades 24/7. Anyway.
The Silvergate Settlement Network, I think.
Yeah. The Silvergate Settlement Network. It was a 24/7 network that allowed the cryptocurrency companies to basically meet their liquidity requirements when the banks should have been closed for business. So regulators basically went to Silvergate and said, you have to cap this, and that's that, even though they had enough liquidity to meet their requirements for these customers, and that essentially forced Silvergate to close. There's a bunch of other stuff in here. That was an informal mandate. It was basically issued via phone calls, right? And as Nick Carter points out in this piece, he talked to someone who is involved with the matter, and he basically said, they told us to do this, and we're not going to argue with them because they would have a million other reasons that they could use to shut us down. So like compliance reasons, anti-money laundering, KYC, which are always the kind of culprits that regulators point to, right? It's like you're facilitating money laundering, or they, chalk this up to investor protections, right? But none of this was done to protect investors. As we kind of learn more about this seemed to be like a singling out of the cryptocurrency industry. And Silvergate was the one that seemed to have gotten it the worst in terms of like they're the poster child and that we know the most about them. But there's also a bunch of other stuff in here about Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and one other bank that was kind of the poster child for this, the Metropolitan Commercial Bank, all of which ended up failing. And a lot of it was because of these pressures from these regulators basically saying, like, we're going to single you out. You need to stop. You need to stop serving cryptocurrency clients. And we now have memos from the FDIC, internal memos that we'll reference later, that detail, like it's like 790 pages of memos that detail all of the ways in which they were discouraging banks from custodying crypto or kind of dragging their feet to give them license to do this. And I really want to be clear about this. The institutions and the companies that these banks would have been servicing were the most buttoned up. Like, this is not them servicing some fly-by-night exchange that just was bootstrapped like, a week before, or foreign actors or anything like this. These were US-based companies and regulated entities, and some of the most buttoned up in the industry. Like, I believe it was Signature or Silvergate, or no, it was Silicon Valley Bank. They were giving banking services to Circle for USDC, which is like the government sanctioned stablecoin. So anyway, that's a little bit of context. There's a lot more.
There's so much context, but I think we want to get to the meat of this, which is what happened in the past couple of weeks is that there was a hearing, and what I would just describe it as like the biggest vibe shift. Whereas a few months ago, a lot of us were wondering, is this just permanently a bad place to do business because we can't even operate legitimately because of some kind of like obscure, indiscernible shadow like directive from the institutions at B? And then we had a hearing and the pendulum was swinging back in our favor. More on that after this. Let me tell you about one of the most slept on opportunities in crypto. Arch is building fast, composable DeFi apps on Bitcoin. Arch apps tap into the OG blockchain with by far the most liquidity and best brand in crypto. I've known the team for over a year. The tech they're building is solid, and they are racing towards mainnet. There's dexes like Saturn, meme coins on funkybit.fun, instant loans on Cha-Ching, and so much more. Plus, they're rewarding testnet users, so join me in trying out Arch while it's still early. I'm wearing a different shirt in that one, so I can guarantee you that this is a real production.
The illusion is shattered.
The illusion is shattered. Okay, so you gave a great premise, laying the groundwork, Colin. Again, we could go on and on about what's going on. We can't tell. Why are we getting debanked? Why does the industry appear to be targeted? And it's coming out into light now.
Yeah, like you said, Charlie, total vibe shift. As I write in this article, which was our Friday newsletter last week, the U.S. House Financial Services Committee held a hearing on Operation Chokepoint 2.0 this week, offering crypto industry professionals a cocktail of vindication, frustration, and relief.
What a line, though.
I would say Schadenfreude, but I don't think it would be Schadenfreude unless maybe they're looking on with Schadenfreude at bureaucrats who are getting their jobs axed. But overall,
who is actually in trouble yet? It's more of it's more.
And
just
will there be any accountability? Probably not. But the point is, to Charlie's, comment about a vibe shift. This was something that was not only not recognized for years, but if you brought it up, people would say you're crazy and potentially even dangerous because it was always cloaked in this language of investor protections. Right. I mean, I think this is important to point out for a lot of people that or at least people in the crypto and Bitcoin side of things. We're still such a small slice of the pie in terms of what people are thinking about day to day, that when you bring it up, no one's going to sympathize with you. No one really sees the dangers of potential debanking of this industry because they don't have any touch points for it. And even if they do, they'll say it's well, isn't that the industry where FTX blew up and a lot of people lost a lot of money? So there's very clear regulatory cover for this, right? But the point about Chokepoint 2.0 is that's why it was so insidious, because it was never about actual investor protections, because Silvergate getting shut down, even though it survived the bank run and could meet its deposits, was choked out for no reason. And now we're having politicians say, actually, this did exist, and we need to figure out why it existed and get to the bottom of how this was allowed to happen, and then hopefully change it in the future. So I want to play really quickly the opening statements from Representative Dan Muser about Operation Chokepoint 2.0.
Oh, yeah, this is good. You got to unmute there. Yeah, on Twitter, too. There you go.
Biden administration's effort to put crypto in the crosshairs. I'd like to thank the witnesses very much for appearing before the committee today to share their experience, their great experience and expertise on this issue. Biden administration's Operation Chokepoint 2.0 was carried out by the prudential regulators to target and, in fact, debank the digital asset ecosystem. The FDIC used offline conversations and threats of formal supervisory actions to pressure banks to deny service to digital asset firms, their employees, and even their customers. This is a serious abuse of regulatory power. Unfortunately, you would be wrong to assume this is the first attempt to debank an entire industry. Beginning in 2013, Obama's Department of Justice enlisted bank regulators in the first iteration of Operation Chokepoint. President Obama's Operation Chokepoint targeted gun manufacturers, payday loan companies, our energy industry, and other businesses and legal industries that were disfavored by the Obama administration. Their plan was straightforward: use the prudential regulator's authority to threaten supervisory action against banks who chose to provide services to these industries. After that, the bank has an ultimatum: continue to bank these customers under the looming threat of scrutiny, or comply with the regulator's demands and remove that line of business from their books.
So one thing to point out here, two things actually. Chokepoint 1.0 under Obama is obviously the precedent to all of this, a precedent for all of this. And as Muser just pointed out, it targeted firearms companies. It also targeted marijuana businesses that were operating legally in states where that was legal, sex workers, a bunch of other industries that the government maybe didn't want around. And the other thing that he pointed out towards the end there about giving the banks an ultimatum, that creates a secondary effect where it's not just about the banks that you go after, it's about the banks who are now scared and won't provide those services because they know what's going on. They're reading the writing on the wall. This is what Caitlin Long at the time, she is establishing that crypto bank in Wyoming, called shooting the stallion to scatter the herd. And I think that's another thing that's missed from this conversation.
There were definitely some pot shots taken at the herd too. Let me tell you.
100%. And but like it then creates this fear among the banks that, oh, they just act Silvergate and they're going after these other banks. We're just not even going to touch crypto clients because we don't want the headache. And then that's where you get a lot of the secondary effects, right? Of like Charlie's testimony of being debanked, or other people in the industry being debanked. I can't tell you, like basically every founder I know has been debanked at some point, either personally or for their business. And that's kind of that secondary effect that the fear of these actions create. And so cannot be stressed enough. The vibe shift and vindication from this is a lot of the reason why Trump curried favor with the Bitcoin and crypto industry to begin with. It wasn't even a matter of them liking their policies. It was survival for a lot of people, because the Biden administration had been so overtly hostile that they said, okay, this guy is saying not only that he's not going to screw with us, he's also going to buy Bitcoin or establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean, it was an easy win for Trump to cash in on. And I hope that the Democrats learned from it, right? Like this didn't have to be this way.
Well, what's funny is like you're seeing, I think in this hearing, like you saw Democrats, even if they were literally the people enacting these shadow policies,
right?
Like pivot and be like, this is, man, oh gosh, it was so bad this happened. Gosh, it's such a darn shame that you got debanked.
Should we
I think Elizabeth Warren even, this may be, skipping too far into it, but
no, I think we should go ahead and do it since it's topical.
Yeah.
This is Elizabeth Warren during the hearing, which, to set the stage, not only was she involved in that first letter in December to Silvergate, scolding them for providing banking services to FTX, she also established this self-proclaimed anti-crypto army, or was raising one. I actually don't know if she said that, but there was a Politico article about it. She's been one of the most vociferous opponents of crypto on Capitol Hill. And this is what she had to say during the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So debanking is a real problem, and we need to work across the aisle to solve it.
Gee, you think so?
Gosh, oh wow, across the aisle, debanking's a problem. Gosh,
God darn it! All of that debanking of all of the, the crypto and Bitcoin companies that share all of your political opinions, some of whom did. Well, we need to stop it for the sake of everyone. As I wrote in my piece, this is kind of like the schoolyard bully getting caught by the teachers stealing people's lunch money and being like, look, we need to work across the aisle. We need to work together on this and figure out why Anon cannot buy a corn dog.
We got to figure out where all the money's going.
Where'd the money go? Well, you know what? You stole our corn dog, Miss Warren, and we have it now, and we are not forgetting, because so many people had their bank accounts frozen and their livelihoods stolen from them. I mean, there was a legitimate, just to contextualize this further, because there are like 1,000 different anecdotes. There were times when legitimate cryptocurrency companies couldn't make payroll.
Yeah.
Because their bank accounts were frozen, or they were kicked out of their bank, or Silicon Valley or Silvergate were shut down. Elizabeth Warren saying that, I don't want to get like too political, but I just find that just absolutely revolting. The hypocrisy is so raw that it kind of surprises me, even for a politician. It's like, you were one of the spearheads of this initiative. Own it.
It's
right?
wild. Like,
just
we
shut
all
up.
just, you know, sometimes I feel that a lot of these like political hearings, it is kind of obfuscated, like who played a major role in whatever issue or grievance we have. But like, it's very clear. We all know it. Like we all know like the idea people and the progenitors of this of the pain our industry has felt. And she is like the leading one.
Yeah, she is one of the leading ones. And it's frustrating because, and I don't know what to chalk this up to. I have some ideas, but the fact that the Democrats became the standard bearers of anti-crypto stuff on Capitol Hill is like not totally shocking to me. But the thing that frustrates me about it is that crypto and Bitcoin became a kind of a partisan issue when it never needed to be.
Yeah, I'm really bummed it's a partisan issue.
You know, it never needed to be. And part of the only reason that it was, honestly, was this Chokepoint 2.0 stuff, where for whatever reason, the Biden administration was like, okay, well, you know, we're going to go after this industry for little to no reason, right? Now, there's the obvious kind of cypherpunk Bitcoin maximalist argument that says, of course, they're going after it because crypto threatens the financial sinews that keep the dollar propped up and the US dominant on the world stage. There's some complications of that with the fact that now
I would say like, I mean, being pro dollar dominance and pro state is also a nonpartisan issue. Both parties love to prop up American imperialism.
Right. And we see that now with David Sachs, the crypto czar, which is his informal title. He's really like the senior advisor to the Presidential Council on Science and Technology. But he had a press conference last week saying that stablecoins are good for dollar dominance and that they want to foster regulation that will help them flourish, right? So for our listeners who aren't aware, stablecoins are cryptocurrencies that are backed by dollar or dollar instruments. They are pegged to a dollar. And they're very popular for cryptocurrency liquidity on exchanges from traders and with the exchanges themselves, but they're also extremely popular abroad in countries that have very weak currencies. People hold these things as digital dollars and they use them for savings accounts and to buy everyday goods. And so to your point, Charlie, it's like that's a bipartisan thing. Obviously, Bitcoin complicates that a little bit, but there was really no reason for this like extremely ham-fisted approach, unless you want to get totally cynical and just look at it, chalk it up to another kind of instance of managed decline or like sabotage, or it could just be total ignorance and like
never attribute to malice what can be explained by ignorance. But man, it sure seems like all the ignorant people are malicious. So.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
But you know, just to recap that, Elizabeth Warren saying this and some of the other Democrats, it's just like this is empty words. It's like you realize that you lost this and there's no right, like they've essentially lost the war on this, at least for now, with Trump in office and with a more favorable Congress towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So just a complete change.
I don't know if you want to change the subject. There are some like highlights from the hearing, I think. You pulled out some really good observations and quotes. I don't know if you have a specific one you want to lead on, but
I think the one from Tim Scott, just going back to the vindication, because like this was something that people didn't believe was happening. And in this hearing, Senator Tim Scott said, speaking of shining a light, just a couple of hours ago, the FDIC under President Trump's leadership just released a fresh set of never before seen supervisory documents, which further prove that Chokepoint 2.0 is real. This is that 790-page PDF dump that I was referencing earlier. You can actually go find it on the FDIC's website.
Yeah, get ChatGPT to summarize it for you, maybe, because I ain't read. No matter how pissed I am,
I ain't reading it either. And honestly, it's pretty boring and shows you how mired in legal A's a lot of this stuff is. And that kind of gives it some of that cover, right? Because you have to read between the lines. They're not like explicitly sending memos. The FDIC is not sending memos to staff being like, we're cracking down on crypto. But if you go through the documents, it's a lot of, we received an inquiry from X or from CEO at XYZ Bank saying they want to custody crypto assets. We are advising them not to do so and will not give them any thumbs up or approval to do that. And a lot of it is kind of this boring, kind of banal compliance language that really belies the truth of the fact that they were trying to completely sweep this business under the rug.
Yeah, it's not like there's one of those like videos taken surreptitiously at a diner where some major spokesperson from one of these shadowy groups like says, well, we're actually trying to do these things. No, it's like it's buried in all this bureaucratic documents, and it's never explicitly said. And as like, and for example, like it was for the, I believe it was Silvergate, or maybe Silicon Valley, is like a lot of these directives were given over the phone. So it's like not recorded and documented. So this is why it's so hard to piece together. And this also assumes that you have major like media and news correspondents like digging into it who are willing to do all the legwork. So again, shout out Nick Carter. Like he did the legwork. He's put this together. He may be in venture, but honestly, he should come work for Blockspace. Actually, yeah. Nick, if everything goes south, we'd love some guest pieces, and maybe we'll hire you if you
want to take a pay cut or just submit some op-eds. We would love to do that.
Yeah,
but yeah. This was a story that just totally went over the heads of a lot of traditional media, and I think part of the reason for that is, again, no one cares outside of the crypto and Bitcoin ecosystem, right? And it's hard to get people to understand why they should care. Also, legacy media has been largely hostile to Bitcoin and crypto for some of the same reasons I think that the Democrats have. There's like this credentialed, academic class that thinks they know better than everyone, and part of it is, oh, well, all of this is scams, right? Yada, yada, yada. I think also part of the problem too is like Nick has privileged information with all of this because he knows a lot of the people.
Yeah, his portfolio companies were getting debanked left and right. I think,
and he has a through line to the actual executives at these banks who were talking to him and telling him, this is what happened from our side. The bankruptcy documents for Signature came out, for Silvergate came out, and then he could corroborate what he was hearing.
Yeah,
right?
You had to be in a seat of privileged information. There's very few people who really could have actually seen the whole picture as it was happening.
Yeah. And I think this is another win for independent media with pirate wires, right?
Yeah.
Like part of the reason why they could report on this is if you read it, it's news, but really it's kind of it's like kind of like an editorial or an op-ed. At least like Nick is writing it from his perspective. And so a lot of, buttoned up, we have 150 years of journalistic integrity to protect, wouldn't print something like this except under an op-ed, because a lot of the information is loosely pieced together. And like, there's nothing on record about the 15%, right? But we have a lot of people saying that happened, and it's not in the actual bankruptcy documents because for a number of reasons. And, a lot of this is kind of loosely pieced together. Part of the reason why no one really gave it credence, but it definitely happened. And I wonder if is the next year just going to be month after month of new things coming out about this, and are we in the clear? That's the other question.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us, we've been under the thumb for so long. I mean, again, as you said, we said at the top, we were no stranger to getting debanked and having hostile punitive measures upon us, but there's clearly something that happened in the latter years of the Biden administration. So a lot of us do have, I would say, PTSD around this topic, and we're always going to be on edge. Also, we're all just kind of naturally on edge because I think Bitcoin self-selects for people who have who have a little monkey on their back or something in some capacity. But like, yeah, I mean, I would expect now that we have people in office, and I think a little bit of elected official fear of like not getting the crypto vote going forwards, you may see some pivots. Like even imagine like Elizabeth Warren or other people kind of placed around her do kind of pivot to explicitly favorable language. Like the bully in the yard becomes, you know, the largest cheerleader of making sure kids get their lunch money. I could see this happen. You've got cases like situations like this which have happened before.
The hall monitor decides to just join the the football team instead of criticizing it or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think that this potentially could be part of a general political realignment. I mean, part of the reason why Trump won is he had this really incredible, in the purest sense of the word, that's not even commenting on it in a subjective sense. It's like looking at this and it's like, how did this guy pull this off? How did a real estate developer who talks like this end up pulling off this coalition? It's this patchwork of very unlikely allies, from the like hippie turned like red pilled Maha movement, from the crypto anarcho-libertarian bros, and then former, you know, Democrats and more independents like Tulsi Gabbard. You know, a lot of the reason why Trump got elected, or there were voices in the wilderness saying we have either been explicitly ignored or left behind, or like completely, you know, wrung out, right? Or targeted for some reason, and we don't understand why, and we're tired of that, and we want to see change. So I'm curious if this will factor into the soul searching that I think some of the Democratic Party will have to do to figure out how they can win back voters, because a lot of the median voter just looked at what's gone on a number of verticals in U.S. government and you know, policy and the social sphere, and said, I don't know what that is. And crypto, while still kind of a small segment and something that, again, like I said, maybe not everyone's worried about, is still a significant voting block.
It's a significant voting block. It's now everybody knows somebody who's been active in crypto. And one thing is that we're also disproportionately proactive, both from a funding standpoint and from a like political or like a cultural hegemony standpoint. Like we scream very loud, and that's really strong. And because everybody knows, like when the market's hot, Bitcoin's at 100K, right? Like Bitcoin probably going to go higher this cycle, and that tends to have associated effects of sucking all the air out of the room for like a lot of these conversations for at least a period of time until the cycle ends or whatever that looks like. So like you know, at this point, everyone's kind of like, oh, well, this is kind of going to be a thing again, I guess. So we have to, and they're now influential. And if you look at the single issue PAC, which was formed like 9 figures, I think, in funding, the largest, best funded single issue PAC this past cycle, like overwhelmingly won most of the races that it funded.
Yeah, so. Didn't cryptocurrency account for the most spending per industry, like for an industry of political dollars?
I have a hard time imagining that, but it was.
I think I'm going to fact check myself on this.
Ask ChatGPT; it'll tell you the truth. So, but we've got this inertia behind us, and now that a lot of these companies are probably reversing course again to not, in fact, leave the United States and probably stay here, some dollars or some tethers, you might say, might be reallocated back to ensuring the survival of the industry domestically. Because I was kind of in question there for a little bit.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a period where we wondered a number of things. I want to put a pin in that. Crypto industry election spending tallies at least 238 million, surpassing traditional giants. Crypto outspent oil and gas and the pharmaceutical industries. That's pretty crazy.
Pharmaceutical and oil and gas.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And it was indicative of a few things. Number one, I do think that this was a cry for help. And it's like, this is like, it was almost like a Hail Mary. It's like, we got to do something because we might not exist as an industry. And Nick Carter tweeted as much. Like, he thought that crypto in the US would be basically decimated by a Kamala Harris presidency, extending some of those policies from Biden. But this was also used in a lot of, like, it was used as ammo against the industry too. So, look at how influential these crypto bros are. They're the reason Donald Trump got elected. You should all hate them. And Mark Andreessen's had a lot of good comments on this. Who did an interview with the New York Times recently. You can go check out the op-ed section. There's a transcription of it, basically laying out why the tech industry pivoted to the right. And a lot of it was the survival instinct, right? Because they felt like they weren't going to be given a fair shake under other policies. So pretty incredible sea change.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are so many things that happened over the last 4 years, not even like Operation Chokepoint 2.0 notwithstanding. There was also an attempt to get anyone who like manages a transaction or touches a transaction, which could be interpreted to include node operators and miners, to get them to be considered money transmitter businesses.
We had so many near misses. Like,
really,
I think we just forget how many like times we kind of came close to making it basically illegal to have any kind of Bitcoin or crypto in the US. And with like the whole Gary Gensler thing too, like, we haven't even talked about
Gary Gensler.
Do we need to dwell? That's Gary under the bridge, you could say.
Gary under the bridge. And then there's the SEC banking directive that basically said that banks couldn't custody crypto. That's been done away with. I mean, there is a laundry list of things that were outwardly antagonistic for zero reason, right? For zero legitimate reason. And I think this leads us to maybe the closing clip for this segment. Will we actually learn from this? And this is Stephen T. Gannon, not Steve Bannon, not to be confused with Steve Bannon. He is a lawyer. His law firm currently is escaping me. I apologize. But this is what he had to say towards the end of the hearing.
But despite the best efforts of Congress, the spirit of Operation Chokepoint 1.0 did not end in 2017. It simply morphed into Operation Chokepoint 2.0. Mr. Chairman, history teaches us that if this time there is no real accountability and no genuine remedies for the actual damage done, one thing is certain: there will be an Operation Chokepoint 3.0. Thank you.
To quote former President George W. Bush, "Fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, you can't get fooled again." But will we get fooled again? And that's what Mr. Gannon is asking there. And you can almost certainly assume that there will be some sort of Operation Chokepoint 3.0. And I want to be very clear. This could happen from a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, and it should be wholesale condemned no matter what it is, because cutting off financial rails from individuals or institutions or industries that are not
bread and butter
that are not committing illegal acts, that are just doing everything above board, it should be wholesale condemned. And it's a violation, honestly, of your fundamental rights as an American, I would argue. So,
yeah. We do got to wrap this up. We're coming up. How do we close this topic? I mean, you said fool me once, fool me twice. You can't fool me or whatever. I wish George Bush had Twitter. If we could have anything, if we could go back in time and change one thing. Well, I would
give
probably
give that man a handle, and not the handle that he might be used to. I think just to close it off, like a few kind of key points from all of this. Like Operation Chokepoint 2.0 happened, and I think that this hearing put to rest any doubts that it happened. The only thing that is left up for, I think, debate at this point is just what was the extent of the damage. And I think it's going to be really difficult for industry proponents to be able to peel back some of those lies and say, a lot of these banks were chalked up as to being failed because of bank runs. Like if you Google Silvergate right now, it'll say it was a bank run. That just fundamentally was not what happened. And I think it's going to be important now that this is widely acknowledged to just really for, industry commentators and proponents to explain exactly what happened so that we can be on the lookout for it if it ever happens again. Now, hopefully those problems are behind us, right? But I'm not so naive as to think that something similar couldn't happen again with a Republican or a Democratic administration. So,
yeah, we're used to being punched in the face. So maybe we have Stockholm syndrome, and we're like, what's going on? Is something wrong? We're not getting punched in the face anymore. Yeah, I mean, if you made it to the end of this episode, thank you for hanging out with us. Maybe it wasn't as Bitcoin focused as you wish, but the majority of the content on this podcast will be like Bitcoin stuff. I think, though, that it's best to set the stage by talking about this major vibe shift from Operation Chokepoint prior to it being, prior to the hearing to now the post-hearing Operation Chokepoint 2.0. I think that'll be a productive backdrop upon which to build a number of episodes covering what's happening on Bitcoin from a technical sense, what's happening at the cultural layer. And Colin and I will be here over the next year covering it for you, dear listener. Colin, where do I find you on social media?
You can find me at As I Lay Hodling. That is ASILAYHODLING. Also, just type in Colin Harper. And you can find all of our stuff at blockspace.media, YouTube. You can find Bitcoin Season 2 and the Mining Pod, our other podcast vertical, and newsletter.blockspacemedia.com for our newsletter. Charlie, where can people find you?
Hit me up on Twitter at CB Spears, like Britney Spears. And I'll see you all next